the rain that started everything. The rain fell relentlessly over Istanbul that evening, drumming a rhythmic melancholy onto the cobblestone streets. The city lights reflected off the puddles and splashes of gold and crimson, blurring the edges of reality and casting the familiar metropolis in a surreal glow. Ethan Walker's office, high above the streets in a glass tower in Levant, overlooked the Bosphorus. From his vantage point, he could see everything, and yet he felt like he saw nothing at all. Ethan tapped his fingers on the mahogany desk, staring at the spreadsheet on his screen, but the numbers were meaningless tonight. His mind was elsewhere, wandering through memories he tried desperately to suppress. The autumn air had a chill that penetrated his apartment earlier, but now the warmth of the office was a shallow comfort. There was a subtle tension he had learned to live with, a gnawing emptiness that success could never fill. Down below, somewhere in Sahanger, Lena Carter was struggling under a battered umbrella that offered little shelter. The thin metal ribs bent under the force of the rain, and her sketchbook clutched against her chest was quickly soaking. Her boots squelched against the slick pavement as she shifted her weight from foot to foot, waiting for a taxi that seemed determined not to appear. Every honk of a passing car and the splash of a passing bus reminded her of the city's indifference. She had traveled from London for a short art project, thinking she would capture Istanbul in serene sketches, but the city had other plans. Tonight, it was a tempest of wind, water, and isolation. It was almost cinematic, the way fate choreographed their first meeting, though neither of them knew it yet. Ethan, frustrated with the relentless march of deadlines, decided he needed air, a break from the polished glass walls and the hum of fluorescent lights. He grabbed his coat, left his office, and descended the elevator that carried him from the sterile comfort of power into the wild unpredictability of the night. Outside, the rain hit him like a slap, cool and invigorating, as though the city were daring him to step beyond his controlled existence. Lena's eyes caught a glimmer of movement across the street, a shadow emerging from the misty yellow glow of the streetlights. She squinted, trying to make sense of the blurred figure. It was a man, impeccably dressed, his coat absorbing the rain but not quite protecting him from its sting. His hair was damp, sticking slightly to his forehead, and his posture betrayed both elegance and unease. Ethan's gaze, scanning the street for a cab, met hers. There was an almost imperceptible pause, a moment suspended in the middle of the rain-soaked chaos. Two strangers, separated by circumstance and chance, caught in a fleeting collision of glances. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the umbrella finally gave way in Lena's hands, snapping in a sharp, metallic crack. She let out a soft gasp, trying to shield her face, but the rain poured onto her shoulders and hair, plastering it against her neck. She looked helpless, drenched, but oddly defiant in her vulnerability. Something in that moment pricked at Ethan's carefully armored composure. Without thinking, he crossed the street, each step measured against the slippery cobblestones, until he reached her side. "Here," he said, holding his large, sturdy umbrella over both of them. The warmth of it was a small, almost trivial comfort, but it was enough to bridge the space between strangers. Lena blinked at him, surprise and relief mingling in her expression. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice carrying a soft lilt of British accent. "I didn't think anyone would stop." "You looked like you needed it," he said simply, refusing to analyze why he had moved, why his instincts had pulled him toward her. There was a subtle tension in the air, a quiet acknowledgement that something was about to shift, though neither of them yet understood how. As they stood together under the small shield of fabric, Lena noticed the watch on his wrist, sleek and expensive, glinting faintly in the rainlight. It wasn't just a timepiece. It seemed to symbolize control, precision, a life meticulously curated. She glanced down at her own dripping sketchbook, realizing how fragile and chaotic her world had seemed tonight, and how strangely grounding it was to stand next to this stranger who radiated order and calm. The taxi finally pulled up, tires splashing water over the sidewalk. Lena hesitated, caught between stepping into the warmth of a private ride or staying under the umbrella just a little longer. Ethan held the door open, his gaze steady. It was an unspoken invitation, one that carried the weight of possibility, though neither could articulate it yet. "Where are you headed?" he asked. She blinked at him. "Sahanger. I live there." He nodded, understanding more than she expected. "Hop in. I can drop you off." There was a moment of hesitation, a silent negotiation between her independence and the rare kindness of a stranger. Finally, she accepted, slipping into the back seat with a small smile. Ethan followed, closing the door behind them, both of them aware that this was no ordinary encounter. The cab moved through the rain-slicked streets, lights reflecting in the pools along Istiklal Avenue. Lena tried to make conversation, but it faltered, tentative. Ethan, usually a man of many words in the boardroom, remained quiet, letting the city speak instead. The distant call to prayer, the rumble of buses, the laughter of people hurrying past. When they reached Lena's building, she turned to him. "Thank you, really. I don't even know your name." "Ethan," he replied. "Ethan Walker." "Lena." "Lena Carter." They shook hands lightly, a polite gesture, but their eyes lingered, holding a quiet acknowledgement that this night had shifted something in both of them. The rain had started as an obstacle, a mundane inconvenience, but it had become the stage on which two lives intersected. As Lena disappeared into her apartment building, closing the door behind her, Ethan remained outside for a moment, watching the water cascade down the streets. His heart, long encased in the steel of ambition and detachment, felt the faintest tug of curiosity, and perhaps something more. Back in his car, driving home through the mist and streetlights, Ethan's mind replayed the encounter. There was an almost imperceptible warmth in the memory of Lena's soaked form, the subtle defiance in her eyes, the way she had clutched her sketchbook as if it were both shield and lifeline. Something had awakened, a crack in the armor of his controlled existence. Meanwhile, Lena, drying off in her small studio, couldn't shake the image of the tall man who had offered her shelter. There was an inexplicable familiarity in his silence, a resonance she couldn't name. And as she finally opened her sketchbook to continue drawing, her pencil trembled slightly, capturing the memory of a night that neither of them would forget anytime soon. Neither knew it yet, but this encounter was the first drop in a flood that would soon reshape both their lives. The rain, relentless and indifferent, had done more than soak the streets. It had set the stage for love, conflict, and revelation. The morning after the rainstorm, Istanbul seemed quieter, almost hesitant. Mist clung to the streets, curling around the minarets and the distant silhouette of the Bosphorus Bridge. Ethan Walker entered his office, glass walls reflecting a pale gray sky, the hum of the air conditioning doing little to pierce the silence. Eileen Kaya, his assistant, looked up from her tablet, her expression a mixture of concern and mild exasperation. "Ethan, you didn't answer any emails last night," she said, setting the tablet down. "Everything is piling up." "I was out," he said simply, still staring at the window. His thoughts were elsewhere. The rain, the city, and, most persistently, the memory of a drenched woman clutching a sketchbook. Lena Carter. Her name echoed in his mind, unfamiliar yet oddly familiar. "Out? In the rain? Again?" Eileen raised an eyebrow. "You need to stop letting the city chase you." He gave her a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "The city doesn't chase me. It just reminds me." Meanwhile, Lena was waking up to the soft glow of a rainy Istanbul morning. Her studio smelled faintly of wet paint and coffee. Layla, her cheerful Turkish roommate, was bustling around the kitchen, humming a tune that seemed to clash with the gray sky outside. "You're late for breakfast," Layla said, pouring a cup of black coffee. "And look at you. Hair still wet, clothes damp. Did you swim home?" Lena smiled faintly. "Something like that. The city has a way of reminding you of your limits." Layla's curiosity was piqued. Limits? Or someone? Lena hesitated, sipping her coffee. The memory of Ethan, the tall man with the umbrella, kept replaying in her mind. There was an inexplicable gravity to his presence, a silent authority that both intrigued and unsettled her. Back at Ethan's office, David Miller burst in, his ties slightly askew and a grin plastered across his face. "Morning, boss." "You look distracted." Ethan didn't respond immediately. His fingers drummed on the desk, tracing invisible patterns as he recalled the rain-soaked encounter. "You met someone?" David pressed, sensing the shift in his partner's usual demeanor. "Not really," Ethan said, finally meeting his colleague's eyes. "Just an incident on the street." David leaned against the desk, curiosity sharpening. "An incident that has you staring out the window like a lost poet?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he allowed a hint of a smile. "Maybe." Eileen cleared her throat. "Shall we review the project timeline for the Bosphorus expansion?" she suggested, cutting through the tension. "Yes. Let's focus," Ethan said, forcing his attention to the spreadsheet again. But the momentary distraction of Lena's image lingered, haunting the corners of his mind. Later that day, Lena ventured out into the drizzle, determined to finish sketches of Galata Tower and the narrow streets of Karakoy. She carried her sketchbook close to her chest, a ritual of self-preservation against the unexpected chaos of Istanbul's autumn weather. Passing through Istiklal Avenue, she noticed a familiar silhouette reflected in a shop window. A tall man, impeccably dressed, moving with careful, deliberate steps. Her heart skipped. Could it be him? Ethan was leaving a client meeting, umbrella tucked under his arm, glancing occasionally at his phone. He paused mid-step, sensing movement at the corner of his vision. There she was, wet hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, sketchbook under her arm, eyes scanning the street. For a moment, the world fell silent again. The rain muffled the city's chaos, leaving only the sound of their mutual heartbeat in the distance. Neither approached. Both paused, caught in the strange gravity that had begun to pull them toward one another. A small cafe opened its door, spilling warmth and golden light onto the street. Lena slipped inside for shelter. Ethan hesitated outside, debating whether to follow or to let the moment dissolve into memory. He chose to follow. Inside, Lena was already seated by the window, pencil in hand, sketching the distorted reflections of streetlights on wet cobblestones. Ethan ordered a coffee and took the seat opposite her, careful to respect the space that was hers, yet compelled to be near. "Your sketches," he said softly, nodding toward the paper. "They capture the city differently." Lena glanced up, surprised by his presence, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "You're the umbrella guy. I suppose that makes me memorable," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. They spoke cautiously at first, words measured, pauses deliberate. Yet, with every exchange, the walls around both began to thin. Lena shared her impressions of Istanbul, the light, the sounds, the textures of a city alive yet intimate. Ethan, in turn, allowed himself snippets of his world, carefully curated, avoiding the depth of his loneliness. Outside, the rain continued its steady percussion. The city seemed to conspire, wrapping the two strangers in a shared atmosphere of suspended reality. Yet, beneath this fragile connection, tension simmered. Eileen, monitoring Ethan's day remotely, noticed subtle changes in his schedule. The brief absence, the longer lunch, the distracted responses, signals that she knew would precede disruption in his otherwise rigid life. Layla, meanwhile, peeked through the cafe window, recognizing Lena's posture and the unfamiliar presence opposite her. A spark of intuition told her that Lena's evening would no longer belong solely to sketches and solitude. Hours later, Lena returned home, fingers still damp, sketchbook clutched against her chest. She didn't know why, but a small sense of anticipation fluttered within her. She had experienced Istanbul's rain countless times, but tonight it felt like a portal, a threshold between the life she knew and the one slowly unfolding. Ethan, in his apartment, stared out over the Bosphorus. His thoughts were occupied by her laughter, the tilt of her head, the way her eyes seemed to measure the world differently. There was a pull he had not felt in years, a dangerous, exhilarating vulnerability. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy and reflective. But for Ethan and Lena, it had left something far less tangible, yet infinitely more potent. A first connection, fragile and unspoken, with a weight of possibility. Neither could have predicted the complications soon to follow. A lost sketchbook, an accidental encounter with David, whispers of old business deals intersecting with the new, and the first hint of betrayal waiting silently in the shadows. For now, though, they were just two strangers drawn together by a rainy Istanbul night, suspended in the fragile moment before their worlds collided in earnest. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy clouds over Istanbul, as though the city itself was hesitant to reveal what had been set in motion. Ethan Walker woke with a subtle tension lodged in his chest, a quiet foreboding he could neither shake nor ignore. Eileen's text had arrived early. Ethan, the board is asking for updates. The Bosphorus expansion meeting is in an hour. Her words were brief, businesslike, but to him, they carried the weight of expectation and the echo of unfinished thoughts from the night before. He dressed quickly, his mind circling back to Lena Carter. Her sketchbook, the way she had tilted her head under the umbrella, the brief, almost imperceptible smile. He had to remind himself she was a stranger. And yet, strangers had a way of changing everything. Lena, meanwhile, returned to her studio with a sense of lingering anticipation. She unpacked her wet clothes, setting them to dry, and carefully laid out her sketchbook. The pages captured Istanbul in swirls of rain and light, but something felt missing. She traced the lines of a cafe window, where she and Ethan had shared a quiet conversation, and realized the encounter had left her both exhilarated and unsettled. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "Are you okay?" She frowned. It was Ethan. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard before replying. "Yes, thank you." "How did you?" "No." Answer came immediately. Then another message. "Just checking." That night, it was unexpected. A small smile crept onto her face, but it faded as the wind rattled the window panes. The city outside seemed suddenly larger, more chaotic, more unpredictable. Across the city, Ethan entered the boardroom with his usual composed demeanor, but the minutes dragged like heavy water. The Bosphorus expansion project, usually straightforward, now felt meaningless against the backdrop of his distracted thoughts. David Miller noticed immediately. "You're miles away again," he whispered. "Something's up." Ethan shook his head slightly. "Focus on the numbers, David. We'll review the projections." Yet, the projections could not hold his mind. As the meeting progressed, a phone call interrupted him. It was the hospital. His secretary's voice trembled. "Mr. Walker, it's urgent. You need to come immediately." The next moments unfolded in surreal haste. Lena had been in a minor accident, slipped on a wet stairwell outside her building while trying to retrieve a lost sketchbook. She was conscious but injured, her ankle twisted badly, and the rain had turned her studio street into a slippery trap. Ethan's car cut through the morning traffic, lights flashing, tires skimming over wet asphalt. His mind raced, not with business, but with fear. The stranger's brief connection had already claimed too much of his attention, and now reality demanded it. At the hospital, Lena lay on a narrow gurney, pale but alert. She tried to smile when Ethan appeared, but the pain and embarrassment tugged at her features. "I'm fine," she whispered, though the slight quiver betrayed her words. Ethan crouched beside her, voice low and steady. "You're not fine. You're hurt. Let me help." The nurse guided them through the sterile corridors, the smell of antiseptic mingling with the faint scent of rain-soaked city streets brought in by emergency personnel. They reached a small room where Lena was bandaged and resting. Ethan sat opposite her, watching carefully. For a moment, the city fell away. The sound of the rain tapping against the window became a lullaby, a reminder that life could be fragile, fleeting, and terrifyingly beautiful. Over the next few days, Lena's recovery forced her to slow down, giving Ethan reason to visit more often. Their conversations deepened, not just casual exchanges, but shared stories, confessions, and laughter tempered by unspoken fears. Yet, shadows lurked in the background. David, meticulous and ever watchful, had noticed Ethan's distracted state. a corporate rival, sensing weakness in the Bosphorus project, had begun subtle maneuvers. Ethan, caught between professional obligations and personal curiosity, felt the first pangs of conflict between his structured life and the unpredictable pull Lena had initiated. Meanwhile, Lena's sketches began to reflect more than the city. They captured moments of vulnerability, fleeting glances, and the subtle shifts of human emotion she now observed in Ethan. Art became a mirror, showing what neither of them dared yet to admit. A connection that was deepening too fast, charged with unspoken possibilities. Foreshadowing whispered at the edges. The lost sketchbook that had caused Lena's fall contained a drawing of a bridge over Bosphorus, the very bridge connected to Ethan's business expansion project, a symbol neither fully understood, yet both instinctively felt its importance. One evening, Ethan suggested walking her home. Istanbul's streets glistened with fresh rain, the lights reflecting in puddles like scattered gems. They walked side by side, silent yet filled with a tension that neither wanted to name. As they approached her building, a shadow detached itself from an alley. A figure, someone who knew Lena's movements, watched them. Anonymous, yet purposeful. A small envelope was slipped under Lena's door before she could enter, leaving behind the scent of damp paper and the first real hint that their connection might bring danger. Ethan, sensing the shift, felt a protective urge he had not experienced in years. Lena noticed the momentary hardening of his features and realized that whatever had begun in the rain was now entangled with stakes neither had anticipated. The envelope lay unopened on Lena's desk that night, its presence a silent question. What comes after first loss, and who can be trusted when the city itself seems to conspire against you? Rainstorms passed, and the city moved forward, indifferent to the private storms of two lives. But inside Lena's studio and Ethan's towering office overlooking the Bosphorus, the echoes of that first accident resonated. The fragile bond formed in chaos had shifted the trajectory of both their worlds, and the coming chapters promised choices, confrontations, and truths that neither could evade. The first loss had been small, a twisted ankle, a scare, but it had shattered the illusion of control. For Ethan, for Lena, and for the streets of Istanbul, nothing would ever be the same again. The days following Lena's accident were a fragile equilibrium, teetering on the edge of inevitability. Ethan's office hummed with its usual mechanical rhythm, yet each email, each phone call felt heavier. Istanbul, drenched once more by intermittent rains, reflected the storm building within him, a storm he could neither control nor fully comprehend. David Miller, always sharp-eyed, noted Ethan's distracted state during a client call. "You've got deadlines, Ethan. The Bosphorus expansion isn't waiting for personal entanglements," he said, voice measured but pointed. Ethan's hand hovered over the tablet. "I understand," he replied, tone clipped. But inside, his thoughts drifted again to Lena. Her laughter, the way she had curled her fingers around the sketchbook, the hesitant way she met his eyes. Meanwhile, Lena navigated the city with an unusual awareness. Every step, every glance carried a subtle tension, as if Istanbul itself had become both partner and adversary. Her sketchbook, now more a journal of observations than mere art, contained images that whispered possibilities and warnings. One afternoon, Lena met Eileen, who had traveled to the historic district to deliver a package from Ethan, a stack of professional documents mistakenly sent to her studio. Their meeting was brief but loaded. Eileen's curiosity sparked questions she couldn't yet voice, and Lena felt the invisible threads of connection tightening. "You too. I can see something is happening," Eileen said, eyes narrowing. "But be careful. People like him they don't easily let life slip into chaos." Lena felt a shiver run down her spine. Chaos. The word felt both thrilling and terrifying. Ethan, however, was already deep in his own spiral. At the board meeting that afternoon, a rival company had launched an unexpected counterproposal, threatening the Bosphorus expansion deal. Numbers and spreadsheets blurred as he wrestled with the stakes. David leaned over, whispering, You're not thinking straight. Is this about her? Ethan's jaw tightened. No. Business is business, he said, yet even he could hear the tremor in his voice. The chaos intensified that evening. Lena returned home to find the mysterious envelope still unopened. Inside was a series of photographs, surveillance images of her arriving at the cafe, leaving the studio, entering the rain-soaked streets. Panic rose in her chest. Someone had been watching her. Ethan, meanwhile, received an anonymous email. Your involvement with the woman on Istiklal Avenue is noted. Be careful what lines you cross. The words were precise, professional, yet chillingly personal. Ethan's mind raced. Threats, business rivalry, unintended consequences. The rain outside tapped against the glass like a warning drum. That night, they both wrestled with uncertainty. Lena sketched feverishly, trying to make sense of the surveillance photos, while Ethan stared out over the Bosphorus, imagining the worst scenarios: blackmail, scandal, or worse. Their thoughts converged unintentionally. Lena, closing her eyes, whispered aloud, "Why now? Why us?" Ethan, in his apartment across the city, muttered to himself, "Why her? Why me?" It was the first real test of their connection. Both knew the stakes were higher than any fleeting encounter. The next day, Lena decided to confront the mystery. She traced the envelope's subtle watermark to a small office in Karakoy. The streets were slick with rain, umbrellas dotting the gray cityscape. She entered the building, heart pounding, sketchbook clutched to her chest like a talisman. Inside, the office was empty. A faint sound of typing echoed somewhere in the back. A figure emerged, a man in a sharply tailored suit, eyes assessing her with precision. "Miss Carter, you weren't supposed to open that," he said, voice calm, almost polite. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, clutching the envelope. "Why are you watching me?" The man's smile was thin, calculated. Considerate observation. You're part of something bigger than you realize. Back at his office, Ethan received a call from David. "Ethan, it's escalating. You need to act now. I don't care about your personal distractions. This is professional." Ethan gritted his teeth. "I know, but I can't ignore the human part either." David exhaled sharply. "Human part? You're getting in too deep. Don't lose focus." "Not now." The words lingered. Ethan realized that chaos wasn't just around him. It was inside him. Business, emotion, danger, desire, they had all collided. Later that evening, Lena returned home, shaken but determined. She called Ethan. "We need to talk," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I know," Ethan replied, tone soft, yet edged with urgency. "Meet me at the cafe. 8 p.m. Alone." The hours leading up to their meeting were tense. Rain began again, light at first, then steady and heavy. Lena prepared herself, checking her sketches, mentally rehearsing questions. Ethan reviewed emails and threats, balancing fear and protective instinct. At the cafe, they faced each other across the table, rain dripping from umbrellas outside, a muted chaos surrounding them. "This is bigger than us," Ethan said quietly, reaching across the table. "But we can't ignore it." Lena nodded, her hands tightening around her sketchbook. "Then we face it together." The city outside seemed to pulse with anticipation, as though Istanbul itself held its breath. And in that moment, the fragile connection forged in rain and chance became the foundation upon which their battle, against external chaos and internal conflict, would be built. The night ended with more questions than answers. Whispers of betrayal, business manipulation, and unseen observers loomed over them. The first spark of rebellion against fate had been lit, and neither Ethan nor Lena would remain untouched. Rain continued its relentless percussion on rooftops and streets. Inside, their thoughts were a storm, emotions, fear, hope, and determination colliding violently. The chaos had begun, and Istanbul, indifferent and vast, watched silently as two lives entwined in unpredictable, irrevocable ways. The rain had softened into a gentle drizzle by Saturday morning, Istanbul waking to a muted sun that peeked through the clouds. Streets glistened, the Bosphorus reflecting the fragile light. For Ethan Walker, the city seemed calmer, almost like it had exhaled after the storm. He arrived at his office early, skipping the usual chatter with Eileen. Instead, he reviewed the Bosphorus expansion projections, but his mind kept returning to Lena Carter. The memory of her hands clutching the sketchbook, the seriousness in her eyes, and the quiet determination she carried, it was impossible to ignore. Eileen approached cautiously. "You've been quieter this week." Something about the woman. Ethan leaned back his chair, fingers steepled. "She's intriguing, but also complicated. The timing, the circumstances, it's messy." Eileen nodded knowingly. "Messy can be good. Just be careful." Meanwhile, Lena spent her morning in her studio, surrounded by sketches of Istanbul's streets and rooftops. The city's textures, the interplay of light and shadow, seemed to echo the delicate state she found herself in. Her wrist brushed the edge of the envelope she had received in Chapter 4, now safely tucked away. The rain's soft tapping against the window was soothing, almost meditative. She began to sketch Ethan, not directly, but through abstractions. The reflection of a tall figure in a rain puddle, the silhouette of someone standing near a cafe window, the curve of a hand holding a pen. The process was both therapeutic and revealing. Her subconscious had begun to map the emotional currents she could not yet name. Layla popped in with a cheerful grin, carrying a steaming cup of tea. "You've been quiet," she observed. "I see the sketches. But what's going on with you and the stranger?" Lena laughed softly, shaking her head. "It's complicated. Nothing's settled. But there's a sense of balance now. Temporary, maybe, but it feels right." Across the city, Ethan left the office for a mid-morning walk along the Galata Bridge. Fog rolled over the Bosphorus, blending water, sky, and distant lights into an impressionistic haze. He paused, watching fishermen cast lines into the gray currents. Reflection weighed heavily on him. The chaos of the past week, the accident, the anonymous messages, the unknown observers had not disappeared. But in Lena's presence, he felt a temporary equilibrium, a fragile reprieve. At the same time, David Miller monitored corporate communications with increasing concern. Rumors of hostile takeovers had quieted, but Ethan's distraction did not go unnoticed. A subtle tension began to grow in the boardroom. The temporary calm was deceptive. Later that afternoon, Lena and Ethan met at the same cafe that had become a neutral ground between them. The city outside shimmered from rain, umbrellas casting fleeting shadows. "I've been thinking," Ethan began, voice low, "about us, about this connection we keep avoiding." Lena's gaze met his, steady and direct. "I feel it too. But there's uncertainty. And not just in us. Someone is watching, someone is waiting. I can feel it in every shadow." Ethan nodded, placing a hand over hers. "We can't control that. But we can choose how we respond, how we move forward. Even if it's temporary, even if it's fragile, we have now." A small smile crept on Alina's face. For the first time in days, the tension loosened. They spoke at length about life, art, business, and dreams, bridging the gap between strangers and confidants. The warmth between them grew, a quiet reassurance amidst Istanbul's restless backdrop. That evening, the city seemed to breathe with them. The tram rumbled past, the call of a distant ferry horn echoed, and the subtle aroma of roasted chestnuts drifted from street vendors. Lena returned to her studio, sketchbook in hand, capturing fleeting moments of serenity, a reflection of the peace she felt with Ethan, however temporary. Ethan, in his apartment overlooking the Bosphorus, reviewed project files but allowed himself a small indulgence. A cup of black coffee and the memory of Lena's laugh. A sense of balance had been restored, if only for a moment, a pause in the otherwise relentless rhythm of life and circumstance. Yet, shadows persisted. Eileen had noticed irregularities in Ethan's schedule, late-night meetings with anonymous clients, missed calls, unexplained absences. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, that temporary balance was always delicate. Lena, too, felt unease beneath the surface. The envelope, the surveillance, the stranger in the Karakoy office, though dormant, remained a whisper at the edge of her awareness. Istanbul's streets, tranquil in the drizzle, carried the subtle promise that calm was fleeting. A week passed. Ethan invited Lena to an art exhibit in the historic district, hoping to nurture their connection outside the constraints of rain-soaked encounters and accidental meetings. They walked along narrow cobblestone streets, the city's lights reflecting off wet surfaces. At the exhibit, Lena marveled at the paintings, sketches, and sculptures. Ethan watched her, her curiosity, her appreciation, her small gestures of wonder, and realized the depth of his growing attachment. He wanted more than fleeting moments. He wanted to understand her fully, even as the external pressures of life threatened to intrude. Their conversation lingered, flowing between art and personal reflection. For a few hours, Istanbul's chaos receded, replaced by the delicate architecture of mutual understanding. As they left the exhibit, a sudden message on Ethan's phone disrupted the moment. "We need to talk. Now. Your project is at risk. Urgent." His eyes darkened. Lena noticed. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern knitting her brow. Ethan shook his head. "I'll manage. For now, let's enjoy this night." But the ephemeral balance was already cracking. Beneath the calm, unseen forces plotted. A corporate rival, a silent observer, and the unanticipated consequences of their growing closeness. Later, Lena returned home, sketchbook open on her desk, tea cooling by her side. The envelope from earlier still rested nearby, untouched. She wondered whether curiosity or caution should guide her hand. Her instincts, finely tuned by experience and intuition, warned of unseen repercussions. Yet the human need to know, the same impulse that had driven her to sketch Ethan, pushed her toward discovery. Ethan, meanwhile, contemplated the city from his apartment balcony. Lights danced on the Bosphorus, fog rolling gently over bridges and rooftops. He allowed himself a brief sense of peace, fragile as it was, and imagined Lena safe, sketching, smiling. The calm, however, was deceptive. Istanbul, with its layered histories, shadows, and streets, had already begun weaving the threads of chaos anew. The city seemed different that morning, harsher, colder, as if Istanbul itself was bracing for a revelation. Ethan's office was silent, the only sound the hum of computers and the occasional clack of a keyboard. He had received no messages from Lena yet, and the absence of her presence gnawed at him more than any threat or corporate challenge ever had. David Miller entered, face grave. "Ethan, you need to see this." Ethan followed him to the conference room, where a collection of documents, photos, and emails lay spread across the table. He scanned the contents, and a chill ran through him. Evidence of corporate espionage, strategic leaks, and worse, emails implicating someone in his inner circle in sabotaging the Bosphorus expansion project. A glance at the center names made his blood run cold. One familiar email, Eileen's account, had been used to send false documents to the rival company. Betrayal, hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, Lena's morning started with an unnerving discovery. The envelope she had been avoiding contained not only the surveillance photos, but also a cryptic note. "Your trust is a commodity. Choose carefully." She traced the handwriting and the type of paper, and unease settled in her stomach. The city, once a canvas for her sketches, now seemed a labyrinth of threats and hidden eyes. Lena realized that the brief moments of balance they had enjoyed were illusions, the calm before a storm she hadn't fully anticipated. She called Ethan. "You need to see this. Now." Ethan arrived at her studio, heart pounding. Lena held up the envelope, her eyes wide with fear and frustration. "Look at this. Someone is orchestrating everything, watching us, manipulating both our worlds." Ethan examined the photos and note. Recognition hit him like a blow. This is serious. We're not just dealing with rival companies or coincidence. Someone wants to control the narrative, control us. Lena's hands trembled. I didn't want to believe it, but the city isn't neutral anymore. It's part of the game. The word game hung heavy between them. Their fragile connection, built on rain, sketches, and tentative trust now faced a test. The revelation came with more than just documents. An anonymous phone call to Ethan later that day delivered the final twist. We know about her. And we know about you. If you care for her, you'll follow instructions carefully. Ethan's grip on the receiver tightened. The threat was direct, yet carefully veiled. It implied knowledge of Lena's routines, her sketches, her very life. That evening, he met with David and Eileen separately. Confessions emerged. Eileen's account had been compromised, coerced into sending falsified reports. David had been aware, but unsure of the perpetrator's identity, fearing exposure would destabilize the company entirely. Ethan's mind raced. Trust, a commodity so precious in his professional life, now extended to the woman he cared for most. And yet, even trust carried risk. Meanwhile, Lena retreated to her sketches, trying to process the betrayal and threat. Her fingers traced lines she had drawn weeks ago, capturing rooftops, streets, and reflections. Each stroke mirrored the chaos encroaching upon her life. She remembered the first time Ethan had saved her from the rain, the warmth of an umbrella, the shelter of someone unexpectedly caring. That memory now felt both distant and vital. It reminded her why she couldn't retreat entirely, why she had to face the storm head-on. A confrontation was inevitable. That night, under a soft drizzle, Ethan walked Lena home. The city's muted lights glistened in puddles, shadows stretched along the walls, and every corner seemed to hold a potential threat. "They're watching," Ethan said quietly, glancing at the streets. "Every step, every decision, they know." Lena nodded. "Then we make our own choices, even if it's dangerous." Their hands brushed. The contact was electric, grounding them amidst uncertainty. Trust and vulnerability intertwined, but both understood the stakes. Love, connection, and survival all were tested in tandem. Later, Lena discovered a pattern in the surveillance photos. The person observing her had left subtle traces, a route, a timing, an item misplaced on purpose. She shared this with Ethan, and together, they began piecing together a strategy. Anticipate moves, protect information, and preserve what mattered most. Ethan, always methodical, established safe routes and checkpoints. Lena, creative and perceptive, predicted patterns and behaviors the observers might follow. Together, they formed a fragile alliance against invisible enemies. Yet, the knowledge of betrayal cut deeper than any threat. Who could they trust? Who among their closest circles might already be compromised? Every decision became critical. The day ended with tension coiled like a spring. Lena returned home, anxious yet resolute. Ethan lingered on his balcony, looking at the Bosphorus, feeling the weight of responsibility, love, and duty converging in his chest. A final message arrived for Lena, and signed, "Tonight, choices matter. Tomorrow, consequences begin." The envelope, the surveillance, the anonymous threats, they had all led to a single truth. Nothing was as it seemed, and the next steps would define not only the success of Ethan's project, but also the fragile connection he and Lena were forging amidst chaos. Rain fell again, soft at first, then steady. Istanbul, indifferent yet omnipresent, bore witness to secrets revealed and betrayals uncovered. The city's heartbeat matched the tension inside Ethan and Lena, two lives entangled in love, danger, and the delicate threads of trust. Chaos had escalated into uncertainty, and the revelation of betrayal marked a turning point from which neither could retreat. The next chapter promised breakdown, confrontation, and a crucible in which their bond would be tested like never before. The city of Istanbul had transformed into a canvas of gray as the week wore on. Rain streaked the windows of Lena's studio, creating streams that mirrored the turmoil in her mind. The discoveries of the past days, the surveillance, the betrayal, the threats, had taken a toll she could no longer ignore. Every sketch she touched seemed flawed, every line a reflection of chaos instead of beauty. She sat on the edge of her work table, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the envelope once more. The note she had received, "Tonight, choices matter. Tomorrow, consequences begin, echoed in her head. Every shadow in the room seemed alive, watching her. Her chest tightened, her thoughts spiraled. Was this love, or just the illusion of safety that had kept her moving forward? Ethan, on the other side of the city, paced his office like a caged animal. His mind was a battlefield, corporate pressures clashing with personal stakes. The Bosphorus expansion was imperiled. Yes, but Lena's safety, her trust, her very presence in his life weighed heavier than any spreadsheet or projection. He tried to focus, to compartmentalize, but every ping of his phone made him flinch. Every knock at the door felt like a potential threat. David Miller, ever pragmatic, approached him with a report detailing further irregularities in the company. Ethan, the leaks are worse than we thought. Someone inside is playing a very dangerous game. Ethan's fingers clutched the edge of his desk. I know, and I know it involves her. His voice was a mix of fear, guilt, and anger. I won't let anyone hurt her. Not her, not us. Lena tried to distract herself with work, sketching rooftops, cafes, and the rain-soaked streets of Beoglu. But each time she laid pen to paper, memories of Ethan's concern, his hand brushing hers, and the warmth of their fleeting moments came flooding back. She was caught between fear and longing, paralyzed by the stakes she could barely comprehend. Hours later, she left her studio to meet Ethan at a quiet cafe, hoping that conversation would anchor her. Istanbul's streets were slick with rain, reflecting the glowing lights and moving shadows. Each footstep felt heavy, burdened by anticipation. Ethan was already there, eyes scanning the entrance, tense. The moment she entered, he stood, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Lena, he said softly, relief and worry mingling in his tone. They sat, the table between them becoming both shield and tether. The cafe's ambient warmth contrasted with the storm outside, yet inside them, the chaos raged. Ethan, everything is falling apart, Lena whispered. I don't know who to trust, what to do, or even if we can survive this. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in both of his. I know, I feel it too, but giving in to fear, that's not us. Not us together. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but they're everywhere, watching, waiting, and even our friends, our allies, might be compromised. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we fight smart. Together. We can't let them break us, not when this connection, what we've built, means so much. Back at the office, David had uncovered a deeper layer of betrayal. Someone had been feeding sensitive project information to a competitor for months, manipulating contracts, misreporting deadlines, and undermining Ethan's authority. The realization hit Ethan with full force. His empire, carefully constructed, was under siege. And Lena, innocent in all this, was collateral damage. He called her urgently. Lena, we need to be strategic. This isn't just a threat to me, it's to us, to everything we care about. Lena swallowed her panic, drawing strength from his words. Then let's face it, together. But her voice faltered. I'm scared, Ethan. I know, he replied, voice breaking slightly. Me too, but fear doesn't win. Not if we act, not if we stay united. As night fell, the city lights reflected in rain puddles like fractured diamonds. Lena and Ethan moved through Istanbul cautiously. Every tram, every corner, every passerby became a potential risk. The weight of betrayal, the uncertainty of trust, pressed on their shoulders. Yet, in each other's presence, they found fleeting solace. They walked along the Galata Bridge, silence stretching between them. The water below churned in the dark, mirroring the storm within. Ethan paused, pulling Lena close. No matter what happens, he said quietly, we endure. We survive. We. A sudden movement across the bridge, a shadow detaching from the darkness, sent Lena stepping back, heart hammering. Ethan's protective instinct surged, but the figure simply passed, disappearing into the fog. The momentary scare was a reminder. Breakdown was not just emotional, but physical, tangible, and immediate. Returning to her studio, Lena slumped into a chair, drenched and trembling. She realized that breakdown was not weakness. It was recognition of stakes, of vulnerabilities, and of the reality that love and danger were entwined inextricably. Ethan, in his apartment, watched the Bosphorus, hands clenched. He allowed himself a long, hard stare into the city's reflection, acknowledging despair while refusing to succumb entirely. The abyss had been touched, and yet he remained grounded by one thought. Lena, and the bond they had formed, rain-soaked and fragile though it was worth fighting for. The night deepened, and Istanbul settled into quiet suspense. The city had witnessed countless betrayals, wars, romances, and secrets. But this story, Ethan and Lena's, was different. Personal, urgent, and precarious. The collapse they had faced, their breakdown, was both a crucible and a prelude. Every sketch, every whispered word, every step in the rain had led to this apex of fear, uncertainty, and raw emotion. The next stage promised rebirth, emerging stronger, sharper, and more resilient. Yet, before rebirth, they lingered at the edge, teetering over the emotional chasm, staring into the darkness of what could be lost. Rain continued its relentless rhythm, drumming against rooftops and streets. Lena's sketches, now scattered across her studio floor, reflected chaos but also the potential for order, a visual metaphor for their journey. Ethan, from the height of his apartment, gazed across the cityscape, imagining the possible futures, both bright and devastating. Breakdown, they realized, was not the end. It was preparation, the forging of resilience, the acknowledgement that when chaos descended, love, trust, and courage would be tested, and only those willing to endure could reach the next stage, rebirth. The morning sun broke through Istanbul's clouds, casting golden streaks across the Bosphorus. The city, still damp from recent rains, glimmered with renewed life, reflecting the fragile optimism settling over Lena and Ethan. The storm of betrayal and breakdown had passed, but its lessons remained etched in their minds, sharp and enduring. Ethan stood on his apartment balcony, coffee in hand, feeling the crisp morning air fill his lungs. He traced the silhouette of the bridges connecting continents, and in that quiet moment, a sense of clarity emerged. The chaos had revealed his priorities, stripping away distractions and forcing him to confront the core of his desires: Lena, the company, and the moral compass that guided him. Meanwhile, Lena sat in her studio, sketchbook open, staring at the cityscape before her. But this time, her drawings felt different, deliberate, precise, imbued with intention. Each stroke reflected resilience, a visual affirmation that she would not be passive in the face of threats. Her sketches were no longer just art. They were a map, a reflection of her understanding of the world around her, and a silent rebellion against forces that sought to manipulate her. She paused, fingers hovering over the pen. "We can survive this," she whispered to herself, "and we can define our story, not them." Ethan arrived at the studio mid-morning. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of wet stone and ink, a quiet contrast to the storm they had endured. Lena greeted him with a cautious but determined smile. "We need a plan," Ethan said, eyes meeting hers. "Not just to protect the company, but to protect ourselves. Every move must be intentional, every risk calculated." Lena nodded. "And we need trust, not just between us, but within the people who remain loyal. No assumptions, no shortcuts. We rebuild carefully." Their hands touched briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged through adversity. The vulnerability that had once been a source of fear now became a foundation for strength. Over the next few days, they began methodically identifying allies, eliminating weaknesses, and shoring up vulnerabilities. Lena's creative mind excelled at predicting behavioral patterns, spotting potential betrayals, and anticipating the moves of unseen adversaries. Ethan's corporate acumen provided strategy, logistics, and precision. Together, they became a unit, not just emotionally but operationally, ready to reclaim control of their lives and the narrative that had been hijacked. One evening, as the city lights shimmered on the wet cobblestones of Karakoy, Ethan and Lena walked in silence. Each step was deliberate, grounded. The distant ferry horn echoed over the water, a reminder that time and movement were inevitable, and stagnation was no longer an option. "Do you feel it?" Lena asked, breaking the silence. The shift. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yes. Strength isn't just surviving the storm. It's rising from it, stronger than before. We're rising." The words resonated, anchoring them in the present. The memories of rain, soaked fears, whispered threats, and fractured trust were not erased, but integrated into a framework of resilience and determination. Meanwhile, David Miller became a crucial ally, providing verified intelligence and tactical guidance. He confirmed suspicions about the insider betrayal and proposed a counter-strategy to secure Ethan's company. They would not just react, they would anticipate, control, and reclaim. Eileen, having regained her integrity and confidence, coordinated secure communications and safeguarded critical operations. The inner circle was small but committed, a network built on transparency and shared purpose rather than convenience or coercion. In her studio, Lena sketched a vision of Istanbul not as it was, but as it could be, a metaphorical representation of their rebirth. Bridges gleamed stronger, streets were populated with cautious but resilient figures, and the rain that had once symbolized chaos now reflected clarity. Ethan watched her work, admiration and gratitude swelling within him. "Your vision, it's remarkable. Not just the city, but how we can approach life now. With purpose, focus, and courage." Lena looked up, eyes bright but serious. "Purpose doesn't eliminate fear, Ethan, but it gives it direction. We'll act not from panic, but from choice." The partnership between them deepened, not merely romantic but symbiotic. They complemented each other, with skills, intuition, and emotional fortitude aligning in ways neither could have anticipated before the breakdown. That night, on the terrace of Ethan's apartment, they planned the next phase. Detailed steps, contingency strategies, and subtle maneuvers were discussed. Every action was calculated, each decision layered with foresight. Their approach was meticulous, disciplined, and yet infused with the hope and human warmth that had first drawn them together. As midnight approached, the city below slumbered, unaware of the quiet transformation unfolding above. Istanbul's heart beat steadily, reflecting both history and the uncharted possibilities ahead. Ethan and Lena stood side by side, looking toward the horizon. The storm had revealed weaknesses, but had also revealed character. They were no longer passive participants, but active architects of their fate. "We've come far," Ethan said softly, hand brushing Lena's. "And we're ready for what's next." Lena nodded. "Next is not just survival. It's reclaiming our lives, our love, and everything that matters." The rain returned in gentle drops, a reminder of the cycle of challenge and renewal. This time, it was not a harbinger of chaos, but a signal of cleansing, of rebirth. The city, with its ancient streets and modern challenges, had become a backdrop for resilience, courage, and determination. Ethan and Lena's rebirth was both intimate and epic, a fusion of personal growth and strategic mastery. They had touched the depths of fear, betrayal, and uncertainty, and emerged transformed, stronger, and ready to face the climax awaiting them. The city was alive with an unusual energy that evening. Istanbul's skyline glistened under the fading golden sun, while clouds gathered over the Bosphorus, casting long shadows on the ancient streets. The tension that had been simmering for weeks was now palpable, almost tactile, in the air surrounding Ethan and Lena. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum. Each step they took heavy with anticipation. Ethan checked his phone once more. Every message, every call, every whispered tip from allies had led to this moment. The saboteur, hidden among their colleagues, was about to make their move. And Ethan knew that failure was not an option. Lena adjusted her coat, rain already dampening the streets. She had mapped the city meticulously over the past days, each sketch a strategy, each line a possible escape or ambush route. The shadows, the puddles, the flickering lights, everything became part of the battlefield. The rendezvous was set at a secluded rooftop near Galata Tower. From there, the city sprawled below like a living chessboard. Ethan and Lena moved with caution, their eyes scanning every corner, every passerby. "Are you sure about this?" Lena whispered, voice tense. Ethan nodded. "We have to confront them directly. No more shadows, no more waiting. Everything we've rebuilt, everything we've endured, it comes down to this moment." The tension built as they ascended the stairs. The wind from the Bosphorus whipped against them, carrying the scent of rain and the faint aroma of roasted chestnuts from the street vendors below. Istanbul, vibrant and unpredictable, seemed to hold its breath alongside them. At the rooftop, a lone figure awaited. Eileen had discovered the identity of the traitor, a trusted senior executive within Ethan's company. Their face was partially obscured by the shadows, but recognition was instant. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said, voice cold and measured. "It could have ended differently, but you chose to interfere." Ethan's chest tightened. "You betrayed everyone. For what? Power? Money? Revenge?" The figure smirked. "All of the above. And to teach you that control is an illusion." Lena stepped forward. "And hurting others? Endangering people's lives? That's just cowardice disguised as strategy." A tense silence followed. The city below hummed, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding above. Suddenly, the traitor produced a phone, displaying incriminating evidence: falsified documents, manipulated contracts, and confidential data. The threat was clear. Ethan's company and Lena's safety were at stake. Ethan's mind raced. The months of betrayal, breakdown, and rebirth had led to this singular confrontation. Every skill, every intuition, every bond they had forged was about to be tested. "Leave now," Ethan demanded, voice firm but controlled. "Walk away, or face the consequences of everything you've done." The figure laughed. "Consequences are what you fear most, aren't they? Let's see how far your strength and your feelings will take you." A sudden movement startled Lena. From behind the traitor, a shadow lurked, a hired observer, ready to intervene. Lena's quick reflexes allowed her to disarm the secondary threat, and Ethan used the distraction to seize control of the primary adversary's phone and documents. The struggle was swift, tense, and cinematic. Every motion seemed amplified, each breath heavy, every glance loaded with fear, anger, and resolve. The city's lights reflected off the puddles around them, turning the rooftop into a kaleidoscope of tension and drama. Finally, with careful precision and teamwork, Ethan and Lena subdued the traitor. The documents, evidence, and technology were secured. They had neutralized the immediate threat, but the emotional confrontation lingered. Lena turned to Ethan, voice shaking. "I can't believe someone we trusted, someone so close, would do this." Ethan held her close. "It's not about them anymore. It's about us, our choices, our trust, our bond. We survived, Lena, and we did it together." Tears mingled with raindrops on Lena's cheeks. "I never thought we'd come this far, but being with you, even through chaos, it's worth it." Ethan kissed her forehead gently. "And this is only the beginning. We've endured the worst and emerged stronger." The city breathed around them, indifferent yet alive. Istanbul's skyline, bridges, and Bosphorus currents became witnesses to their triumph. Every shadow of betrayal had been illuminated, every threat countered. But the memory of danger remained, a reminder that vigilance and trust were ongoing, evolving necessities. Ethan and Lena finally descended from the rooftop, hands intertwined. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening, reflections of neon signs dancing like small victories on wet asphalt. They walked through the city, silent yet united, their bond cemented by shared trials. The climax of danger had passed, leaving them exhilarated, exhausted, and deeply aware of the fragile beauty of trust and love. Back at Ethan's apartment, They reviewed the captured evidence and ensured all threats were neutralized. Every loose end was tied, every ally briefed. Their personal and professional spheres were finally in alignment, protected by strategy, courage, and mutual loyalty. Lena looked out the window at the city below. Istanbul feels different tonight, she said. Like we've reclaimed it, somehow. Not the city itself, but our place in it. Ethan smiled, resting his head beside hers. Exactly. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about defining our world, our story, together. The night stretched on, quiet but filled with subtle energy. The calm after the storm, a testament to endurance, courage, and the emotional journey that had brought them here. Their rebirth had led to triumph, but also awareness. The city was unpredictable, the world was fragile, and love, real, tested, and resilient, was the force that gave them strength to face whatever came next. The morning in Istanbul was crisp, with sunlight filtering through scattered clouds. The city, alive with movement, felt renewed, not unlike Ethan and Lena themselves. Weeks of tension, betrayal, breakdown, and rebirth had culminated in a quiet clarity. They had survived the storm, faced the threats, and reclaimed not only their safety, but their lives. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee, the aroma filling the apartment with warmth. Lena sat by the window, sketchbook open, her hand tracing the contours of Istanbul's skyline. Unlike before, her lines were calm, deliberate, and filled with confidence. You know, Ethan began, handing her a cup. We've learned more than I ever expected about trust, resilience, and ourselves. Lena smiled, taking a sip. And about the city, about how it mirrors life. Chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes harsh, but always beautiful when you know where to look. Their gaze met, a shared understanding passing silently between them. Every challenge they had faced, the rain-soaked streets, the betrayal, the corporate sabotage, had strengthened their connection. Fear and uncertainty had been catalysts, transforming them from cautious survivors into deliberate architects of their own destiny. The evidence against the traitor was delivered to the authorities, ensuring justice was served. Ethan's company, though bruised, emerged stronger, its internal security reinforced and its ethical foundation restored. Every ally who had remained loyal was recognized, their trust and dedication deepening the network of support surrounding them. Yet, despite professional victories, it was the personal victories that mattered most. Lena and Ethan had learned to communicate, to rely on each other, and to face challenges without losing their integrity. Weeks later, they revisited the streets of Istanbul together. The tram tracks glistened after a recent rain, the reflections of streetlights dancing across wet cobblestones. Vendors called out their greetings, the aroma of freshly roasted chestnuts mingling with the cool breeze. This city, it feels like it belongs to us now, Lena said softly. Ethan wrapped his arm around her. Not the city itself, but our story within it. Every corner, every streetlight, it witnessed our trials, our victories, and our bond. They walked in silence, content in the shared rhythm of their steps. The challenges of the past seemed distant, though never forgotten. The lessons remained, engraved in their hearts. Trust must be earned, love must be nurtured, and resilience is forged through adversity. Back at Lena's studio, she placed her completed sketches on the wall, each one a visual chronicle of their journey. From rain-soaked nights to rooftop confrontations, from breakdown to rebirth, the art reflected the emotional tapestry of their lives. Ethan stood beside her, admiration clear in his eyes. You captured everything, he said. Not just the city, but us. Every struggle, every triumph, every moment of doubt and hope. Lena's smile was quiet but radiant. It's more than art. It's proof that even through chaos, love and purpose can endure. As evening fell, they found themselves on the terrace of Ethan's apartment, overlooking the Bosphorus. Lights shimmered on the water, boats gliding like reflections of their own journey. Sometimes unsteady, sometimes deliberate, but always moving forward. I used to fear the unknown, Ethan admitted. But now, I see it as possibility. We've faced darkness, and we've found light together. That's what matters. Lena rested her head on his shoulder. And we'll keep finding it. Together. No matter what storms come next, this bond, this trust, it's ours. The city whispered around them, a blend of history and modernity, chaos and beauty. Istanbul had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately witnessed their triumph. Weeks turned into months. Ethan and Lena's personal and professional lives flourished. The company expanded cautiously but securely, now guided by principles of integrity and foresight. Lena's art gained recognition, admired not only for aesthetic brilliance, but for the emotional depth that mirrored real-life struggles. Their love matured, rooted not in fleeting passion, but in shared resilience. Every rainy night, every uncertain step, every shadow of betrayal had strengthened their bond. They no longer feared the storms, because they knew they could weather them together. The moral of their journey became clear. Life is unpredictable, filled with challenges that test courage, trust, and heart. But with resilience, empathy, and mutual support, even the most harrowing experiences can transform into profound growth and connection. For Ethan and Lena, the rain-soaked streets of Istanbul were no longer symbols of fear. They were reminders of perseverance. The betrayals had taught vigilance. The breakdowns had fostered reflection, and the rebirth had created an unbreakable alliance. As they watched the city lights dance on the Bosphorus, they understood something universal. Life's storms are inevitable, but love, courage, and purpose provide the compass to navigate them. That night, the city seemed to exhale. Istanbul had endured countless stories of love, betrayal, triumph, and loss. But Ethan and Lena's journey left a mark not only on their lives, but on the emotional landscape of the city itself. Hand in hand, they faced the horizon, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with certainty that together they could face whatever challenges awaited. Their journey was complete, yet it also promised new beginnings, proof that the human heart, tested by adversity, can emerge stronger, wiser, and unyielding.